Okay. So there are, it looks like over 50 people in the meeting. So just to set up some ground rules to make sure that this is a professional and constructive event, hopefully you should be able to see my screen that I'm sharing that has the agenda and ground rules. It's quite a basic agenda. I'm providing the welcome and introduction and background right now, and then we're going to have some other state staff provide a summary of the notice, and then we're going to open things up to public comments. Our request is, if you are going to be speaking to provide comments, that you also provide comments to us in writing, but we will have this recording for the record also. For those of you that are on the Teams on the computer, if you can please be sure to mute yourself and keep yourself muted. Just with so many people, there can be a lot of background noise and things like that that we want to try to limit. So if you can look and see if there's a microphone with a slash through it, that means you're muted. If there's a microphone that's like this, it means you're not muted. You click on that to mute or unmute yourself. We're going to have Dana Nagy is going to be managing the hand raising and chat window portion. So once we are able to go through the introduction and the summary and we open up to public comment, if you can please raise your hand, and you do that by clicking on the hand button. And then we'll try to keep as good of order and remember as close as we can the order in which you've raised your hand in order to try to get folks to provide their comments. If you're on the phone and you probably are on mute right now, if you are on mute and you're on the phone, you press star and then 6 to unmute yourself. So just some basic ground rules. Like I said, please keep yourself on mute. It's up to you whether you want to have your video transmit or not. Please limit and eliminate talking over one another. We don't want to have people talking over one another and just having confusion or any sort of side discussions going on. If you do plan to talk or plan to have any sort of presentation, we ask that you limit it to 5 to 10 minutes because we do have a considerable amount of people in this meeting currently. You can put a comment in the chat box. If you're on the computer app for Teams, you can click on this little like cartoon thought bubble. You can click on that and it brings up the chat pane. We will have staff moderating and looking into that. The expectation for the most part is we will be receiving comments. We're not expecting to answer every question we receive today. We will be providing a responsiveness summary in the future. So really this is for information gathering for you all to convey information to us, and we will then take it under consideration and take it under review and research as necessary. So because that we do ask again, like I said, if you provide something in verbally today, we ask you also submit in writing following the meeting if you haven't already. If you are in need, on the agenda that was posted on our website, there is the option to have closed captioning, a live captioning on Teams provided if you need that accessibility. If there is any sort of disruption, you'll be asked to leave the meeting. We reserve the right to remove disruptive individuals should that happen. I don't anticipate that, but I think we've all seen and heard horror stories about big meetings with people from the outside hacking or coming in or something like that. So we may decide that we need to remove somebody. If something goes completely awry and there's something gets trolled or there's somebody comes in and starts doing something inappropriate from the outside world, I will end the meeting and then restart the meeting using the same link, and then we'll try to make sure we maintain the guest list and the participant list accordingly. So with that, thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming to this public informational meeting. We're going to be conveying some information about the proposed notice of proposed rulemaking that was posted regarding the regulation of PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances in drinking water in Vermont. Like I said, we're going to have some state staff to provide a summary of the notice and of the report that was provided, and then we're going to drill into a little bit of the details behind that report, and then, as I said, we'll open it up to questions. So when we do questions, we will start with those that raise their hand in the chat. Please don't just queue up yet. Just wait until we're done with the discussions to raise your hand. And then if you are one of the individuals on the phone, because you can't really raise your hand on the phone as easily, we will have a designated time for questions from those folks that are on the phone should the need arise. So I think with that, I will hand it over to my colleague Trish Coppolino to talk about the report.
So I was asked to provide an overview maybe of what we did and how we did it. So I was on a group of other state staff where we looked at whether or not we could regulate PFAS as a class. And what we tried to do was look at areas within state government where we are already regulating other compounds as a class, so PAHs and dioxin and PCBs, and how that works and how those standards were comprised of and created, and then started to look at what other available data is available to look at PFAS as a class to see whether or not it was there was enough information there that supported Vermont being able to do something more than what we currently do, looking at the 5 PFAS compounds. So what we did was we looked at publicly available data that exists, and what we tried to do is look at the different ways that PFAS can be looked at as a class, and then do some sort of comparison as a pro and con as to whether or not Vermont could support that, in addition to what we currently do now. And if you're not aware of what we currently do now, we have 5 PFAS that we add to a total for both groundwater, drinking water, and soil to look at one standard for those media. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail related to our analysis because that's all in the report, but we'll at least let you know, the different things that we looked at, and the outcome for most of them is that they were not supported by Vermont at this point, but that's why we're having this meeting, so you can provide more information to us. So we looked at additive, which is currently what we're doing. To do more than that was not supported. We don't have the data now to do that. We looked at different types of subclasses, and so that's basically grouping the PFAS into subclasses to see if we would regulate them that way. We looked at TEQ, which is how we look at PAHs right now, in dioxin, and their data wasn't there to support that either. Non-targeted analytical techniques. So these are different ways that are almost more like screening rather than something that could be used as a standard. And so we looked at AOF and EOF. We looked at the QTOF, and we looked at top assay. And for all of those, they were not supported data-wise for us to also look at methods to create a standard based on health impacts. I'm not sure how much detail, Ben, you were hoping to go into this since it all is in the report, but those are the different methods we looked at, and we tried to do a pro and con for each one to come up with something that was at least transparent for all of you to understand what our thought process was. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ben.
Okay, thanks, Trish. For those that aren't aware of the actual document to which Trish is referring, it is on our website. If you Googled Vermont drinking water PFAS as a class, it should pop up. So for those of you that are not on the Teams app right now, I will put into the chat function of Teams right now the link to find that report, so that you can look at it in more detail if you have not yet had a chance to look at that. So I think at this point, if there are other members of the state staff or the state team that were involved with this, if you'd like to add anything or clarify anything before we open things up, now would be the time to do so. So if you're in the state and you want to unmute yourself and chat a bit, please do.
I would add that the group of that was on the group was folks from sites management, drinking water, health, and our rivers program. So that was the group of people that worked on this document.
Okay, so hearing or not seeing any other state staff popping up to add anything, now's the opportunity for folks to start raising their hand and start providing public comment. Again, if you can be sure to raise your hand, we'll take you in the, hopefully more or less in the order in which we receive the hands, unless it gets to be a lot. We'll try to go as efficiently as we can. And then again, my request is if you do provide something to us today, that you also follow up in writing. So Dana, if you want to start with a roll call as folks, as they raise their hand.
Katie Pelch. Sorry, I'm trying to, I'm having, unmuting her. I've unmuted her, but it's not.
Okay, so you said Katie Pelch. So Kate,
Yeah.
if you're available to chat, now would be the time.
I think I unmuted myself.
Okay,
Can you all
there you are. Yes.
Fabulous. Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. I am an assistant professor in the field of environmental and public health with more than 15 years experience evaluating the health effects of toxic chemicals, and have specifically been working to address drinking water regulations of PFAS since 2016. I want to start by applauding the steps that Vermont has already taken to regulate a group of 5 PFAS chemicals at a level of 20 parts per trillion. I further appreciate that Vermont has taken the first steps to consider regulating PFAS as a class, a feat that is not easy in light of a lack of federal leadership on this important issue. Exposure to PFAS is associated with a variety of health concerns. The C8 study in the Mid-Ohio River Valley evaluated the health effects in communities drinking water contaminated with PFAS. In this case, they were only looking at a single chemical, PFOA. After evaluating nearly 70,000 community members, PFOA exposure was determined to be associated with an increased risk of kidney cancer, testicular cancer, preeclampsia, high cholesterol, and ulcerative colitis and thyroid disease. In the years since this landmark C8 study was published, we have learned that many more PFAS not only contaminate our drinking water and our environment, but are also associated with similar health concerns. For example, the US National Toxicology Program, after reviewing the evidence contained in 33 human epidemiological studies and nearly 100 animal toxicological studies, declared that PFOA and PFAS are presumed to harm the human immune system, notably by decreasing the body's ability to mount an effective immune response. PFOA and other PFAS have also been reported to impact early life development, and yet these chemicals remain unregulated by the federal government. Last month, EPA updated the CompTox dashboard, which now indicates there are over 8,000 unique PFAS structures. Even if only 1% of these are concerning due to their environmental occurrence and/or toxicity, that would still leave 80 PFAS that would require extensive and detailed information be known about their use in order to undergo formal risk assessment. Ideally, scientists and regulators would need to know the following for each of these PFAS. They would need to know the distribution and mobility in the environment, the feasibility of detection, the expected exposure profile, the pharmacokinetics in humans and in animal models, the possibility of harm to human health, and the observed outcomes when administered to animal models under experimental toxicological settings. All of these studies require an immense amount of resources and time. This would be time on the scale of decades. That's decades in which communities are left unprotected and consuming contaminated drinking water. The fact that the US EPA has yet to set regulatory standards for even PFOA and PFAS, and currently only regulates about 100 chemicals in drinking water, indicates that a full evaluation by EPA of even 1% of PFAS using traditional risk assessment approaches is unrealistic and unfeasible. This is a burden both to public health and our resources that we cannot and must not carry. Vermont has already taken important first steps to regulate PFAS as a class by enacting a combined standard for 5 PFAS in drinking water. PFHPA, PFNA, and PFHXS were added to the existing standard for PFOA and PFAS because of their known similarities to these chemicals. There is no reason to, at a minimum, add the remaining 13, or there's no reason not to, I'm sorry. At a minimum, add the remaining 13 PFAS that are measured with EPA method 537.1 to this combined standard. Several of these PFAS are already detected in Vermont drinking water, including PFHXA, PFTRDA, PFBS, and others. Is the state confident that these are not associated with human health or environmental health concerns? This is why a class-based approach is not only needed for protecting public health, but is also conservative of Vermont's resources and time. But this is still just the tip of the iceberg, and really the minimum which should be done. While a class-based approach to chemical management can pose challenges to the traditional paradigm of individual chemical risk assessment, the extreme persistence and potential for harm from thousands of PFAS demand a more efficient and effective approach. Lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent public health protections and environmental degradation. The advance notice provided by Vermont stated that no guidance exists for regulation of PFAS as a class. However, you failed to discuss existing approaches that do just that. For example, the EU Drinking Water Directive in December of 2019 called for two things. First, the immediate regulation of the sum of 20 PFAS in drinking water at 100 parts per trillion. And second, the development of a treatment technique for total PFAS within 5 years, enforceable at the level of 500 parts per trillion. Further, it was not mentioned that another approach that was not mentioned was the derived relative potency factor for 19 PFAS, including PFOA and PFAS, that had been proposed for use by the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment in the Netherlands. These approaches can and should be used as models by Vermont, as they are defensible steps in taking action to regulate PFAS as a class in drinking water. In closing, I would just like to thank you again for your time, and I look forward to submitting detailed written comments in collaboration with the Natural Resources Defense Council to further support the statement I have made here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Shayna Casper.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, my name is Shayna Casper. I'm the Vermont State Director with Community Action Works, formerly known as Toxics Action Center. And I'm here today to call on ANR to establish a maximum contaminant level goal for PFAS class at 0 parts per trillion, and establish rules that ensure all PFAS are removed from drinking water and lower the standard from 20 parts per trillion to 1 part per trillion in order to best protect public health and the environment. At Community Action Works, we believe that environmental threats are big, but that the power of well-organized community groups is bigger. And that's why we work with side by side with everyday people to confront those who are polluting and harming the health of our communities. And we partner with the people who are most impacted by environmental problems, training them with the know-how anyone would need to make change in their own backyard, because when neighbors know how to make change, they can build the power to transform our world. So I began working with community groups fighting PFAS contamination here in Vermont, in Bennington, in 2016. And that work has now grown over the past 4 years to now co-facilitate a national coalition of grassroots groups fighting PFAS drinking water contamination in their communities. We know that there are over 8,000 PFAS chemicals still largely unregulated in use and commerce and disposal and in our drinking water. And more scientists are raising the alarm that there is no safe level of PFAS in our water. These chemicals cause severe health problems, including kidney cancer, kidney disorders, cancers, reproductive disorders, and much more. Because PFAS suppresses the ability of the immune system to make antibodies, the part of the immune system critically important to fighting COVID-19 and other infective agents, COVID has had disproportionate impacts on PFAS impacted communities. We also know that Vermont's drinking water contains more than just the 5 PFAS that we currently regulate. And the PFAS Coalition is actually releasing a PFAS action agenda today, this afternoon, with their list of demands to the federal agencies. And it's unfortunate that we have to rely on states like Vermont to take action because of the total inaction at the federal level to regulate and to stop exposures to chemicals like these. We know what must be done, and we're hopeful and calling on the federal government to take action. But in the meantime, we're calling on states like Vermont to really take the lead. So that's why we're calling on 1 part per trillion maximum contaminant level for total PFAS. and for a 0 part per trillion MCLG for PFAS as a class as well. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I'll also provide comments in writing, and I'll be including the PFAS action agenda for your information as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Paul Burns.
Yes, hello. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I am Paul Burns, Executive Director of the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, or VPIRG, and I share many of the interests and concerns that have been laid out by the first couple of speakers, and particularly Shana Casper. We are also working closely with other partners that I believe you'll hear from today, including Jen Duggan at Conservation Law Foundation. And so I'm not going to repeat or mention all of the things that I think you will hear from some of the other witnesses, but I will say that I join others in expressing my appreciation for the work of the agency, the department, various state staff and officials who have truly engaged in protective actions over the last several years to address the discovery of PFAS chemicals in Vermont, the need to protect the citizens of this state from PFAS in our drinking water. I know that it has been some extraordinary work. I know that much of this work has been done without a model. Vermont really stepped up with the discovery of PFOA in private drinking water wells in Bennington County and elsewhere, and has genuinely been a leader in many of these areas. And again, I appreciate that. Our concern here is, as a public interest organization focused on protecting our environment and human health, that this is a particular class of chemicals that there is a danger where if we regulate a subset, particularly a small subset of the substances, that we may be substituting one bad thing for another, or at least failing to capture the full range of hazardous consequences of these chemicals in our environment and in our water. So that's why we encourage the agency to address these chemicals as a class. I know that you have seen some other information on why that's important, but I would just say that you all are certainly aware that this is a huge and complex class of chemicals. The industry has created literally thousands of these PFAS chemicals. They're used in everything from carpeting to cookware, cosmetics to firefighting foam. PFAS are also found in food packaging, including food packaging used in fast food chains like McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King. A report released just last month from Mind the Store identified quantities of PFAS toxins in food packaging in these fast food chains. And that's a concern not just from the human exposure that may result from the chemicals getting into the food and being consumed by humans, but also as those materials are disposed of or find their way into our environment and may ultimately find their way, those chemicals, into our water supplies. They're extremely persistent, obviously known as forever chemicals, and toxic and a threat to human health, as has been described by others. There is no safe level of PFAS in our water or in our bodies. And so I join again with others in calling for the 1 part per trillion maximum contaminant level, the 0 standard as well, and most importantly from our perspective, the regulation of PFAS as a class. And I recognize that that presents challenges. I don't dismiss that, but I worry that if we fail to regulate PFAS class of chemicals, that again, we may see a switch or substitution from one to another that does not result in greater protections to public health, but just may get somebody out of a regulated class, and that wouldn't provide the protections that we're looking for. So I'm happy to continue the conversation. I'm supporting the work of others and appreciate the work of the agency in these matters. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Jen Duggan.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Jen Duggan, and I am the Director of Conservation Law Foundation. I'm also providing these comments on behalf of the Vermont Natural Resources Council. And I want to also echo others who have expressed their appreciation for the work that the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health have done to address these dangerous forever chemicals. As we know all too well, here in Vermont, we are not immune to contamination. These toxic forever chemicals have been found at unsafe levels in drinking water throughout Vermont, as well as in ground and surface waters, sludges, and wastewater discharges. And the results of recent water supply testing required by Act 21 is really alarming. PFAS were detected in more than 100 public water supplies. And PFAS beyond the 5 that are currently regulated are also present in our drinking water. These toxic forever chemicals are a public health perfect storm because they are toxic in very small concentrations, persistent in the environment. They are bioaccumulative. They are highly mobile in water. They're used in hundreds of different industrial and commercial processes, and they're found in a wide variety of consumer products. And there are over 8,000 different kinds of these dangerous chemicals. We know that drinking water contaminated with PFAS is a significant source of exposure. And you've heard from Katie Pelch that these PFAS have significant health concerns, including links to cancer and other severe health problems like learning disorders in infants and children, fertility and pregnancy issues, and impaired liver, thyroid, pancreatic, and immune function. Perhaps, most alarmingly, given the time that we live in today, studies have identified the immune system as a target of PFAS toxicity. Some studies have found decreased antibody responses to vaccines, and associations between blood serum PFAS levels and immune system hypersensitivity and autoimmune disorders. On top of these serious health threats, a former director of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences recently warned that exposure to even small amounts of PFAS could make people more vulnerable to serious cases of COVID-19. Action by EPA is long overdue, but we know we can't expect it anytime soon. The science linking PFAS to these terrible health risks is not new. EPA has known about these hazards for decades. Chemical manufacturers have known of the risk for far longer, yet they have recklessly continued producing PFAS. Meanwhile, EPA has repeatedly looked the other way and allowed these companies to continue polluting our bodies and our waters while failing to take meaningful action to protect us. When it comes to setting drinking water standards, EPA has historically been paralyzed. They have established no new standards since 1996. That's more than 20 years. And there's no reason to expect they'll finalize drinking water rules for PFAS chemicals anytime soon. Even if they do move forward, EPA is only considering regulating PFOA and PFOS. That's just 2 out of 8,000 chemicals in the class. With federal regulators abandoning their responsibility to protect public health, Vermont must step up and take the lead in protecting drinking water. And Vermont has taken very important first steps by establishing the current MCL of 20 parts per trillion combined for 5 PFAS compounds. However, we know this is just a start, and it does not guarantee that our drinking water is safe. There are more than 8,000 kinds of PFAS, and if we are serious about protecting communities from these toxic chemicals, we must remove each and every one from our drinking water. Without a drinking water standard for the class of PFAS chemicals, public water systems in Vermont are not required to regularly monitor for these compounds or to treat unsafe water. I also want to just highlight what others have said, and that we know that research has suggested that PFAS levels above 1 part per trillion may have serious health consequences, and that's 20 times lower than the current MCL. We need rules that protect us from the class of PFAS chemicals. We cannot afford to burn resources and time to chase these dangerous chemicals down one by one, while communities are forced to drink water that has permanent health consequences. And class regulation will help us confront the fiction that we are only exposed to one contaminant at a time. Safe levels must take into account the cumulative impacts of exposure to multiple PFAS and other chemicals. That's why we are urging DEC to establish a maximum contaminant level goal for the PFAS class at 0 parts per trillion, establish rules that ensure that all PFAS are removed from drinking water, and lower the numeric standard to 20 part per trillion from 20 part per trillion to 1 part per trillion in order to protect public health. We do not agree with ANR's conclusion that there is simply no path forward to regulating the PFAS class or subclasses. And as you heard earlier from Katie Pelch, the advance notice failed to include discussions of scientific and technical approaches that support a class or subclass-based approach to regulation of PFAS. ANR has broad legal authority to establish rules that protect Vermonters from the class, and the lack of complete scientific certainty with respect to each of the 8,000 PFAS compounds should not be used as a reason for postponing common sense and cost-effective measures to protect public health. We look forward to providing detailed written comments on the advance notice. And again, we urge DEC to establish an MCLG for the PFAS class at 0 part per trillion, establish rules that ensure all PFAS are removed from drinking water, and lower the numeric standard from 20 part per trillion to 1 part per trillion in order to protect public health. We appreciate all of the work that ANR and VDH are doing to address this important public health issue, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on these important rules.
All right, thank you.
I think that's all we've got with raised hands, Ben. At the moment.
Okay, so at this point in time, if there's anyone on the phone who would like to provide some comments, that if folks are there, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself, and we'll take a few comments if there are any. Okay, so if there's anybody on the phone who's trying to provide comment, you're still on mute, so you haven't come through. I'll give another few seconds in case folks are having technical issues. Okay, so hearing none, one last offer for anyone else who's on the Teams app who would like to provide comments that haven't already.
Hello.
Oh, yes.
This is Lindy Sargent calling, and we've been trying to unmute myself.
Okay.
Is there time to still ask a question or mention?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm with DUMP, Don't Undermine Memphremagog's Purity, and we've been following the PFAS discussions, not so much this, I just heard about it today from the NRC, and thank you very much for sending out an email to all members about this discussion. we will look at this and comment. I just wanted to mention, after hearing from the other speakers, that in that we have so many plastics in our waste stream, which are all heading to Coventry, and then are all heading back to Montpelier and Plattsburgh in leachate at this point. That is something that I would really like the state of Vermont to be looking at. And we would be happy to provide more information, and we'll look at that and put it together in a comment. When is the comment period closed?
So the comment period will run for another 30 days, so November 16th.
Okay.
On our website is some information. It's the report. It's my email address. They can come to me. If possible, if you could put PFAS as a class in the subject line, so I can address them and put them in a folder. I will not be responding to them one by one. I will combine them and put them all together, and we'll work on that centrally.
Okay, that's certainly fine. We the NRC forwarded all the information, so that was very helpful. And thank you for having this conversation. And I hope that we can be thinking forward to that aspect of the wastewater discharge and the concerns about it going into not only our waters, the lakes, the watersheds, but into the drinking water. A little bit more indirectly than perhaps what happened in Bennington, but still a danger. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So anyone else with any comments? Last chance. So then, oh, okay. Carol O'Connell. Carol, if you're speaking, you're still on mute. So I see a hand raised for Carol O'Connell. Oh, there she, okay.
Yeah, here I am.
All righty.
Sorry. I just wanted to follow up with Lindy's comment because I'm on the dump committee with her. And so we'll probably be putting something together as a group. So you'll hear from the committee itself. But basically, I was happy that she brought up the whole issue of leachate, which was what I was going to mention if no one else brought it up. Because right now, the technology for removing these chemicals from wastewater is evidently expensive and maybe not as thorough as people would wish. It's still kind of an experimental thing that has implications for small Vermont communities who may have to, look at cleaning the leachate and entailing, more expense and more build out for these facilities. So I just wanted to back up Lindy's statement and, put my 2 cents in.
Okay, thank you. It may have just been my connection, but that was, I think I got your message about concerns of leachate. It was very, I would say pixelated, but that's not the right word for audio. But so if you could be sure to send something in writing to make sure we have everything.
Will do. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else in the chat?
Ben, this is Andy Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I operate water system 5090, and I'm very interested in PFAS. I'm also interested in what would it cost to test for all of them versus the 5 we're testing now.
So I can provide a little bit of an answer to that one. Your water system, as a regulated public drinking water system, is required to actually analyze for 18 under the method 537.1. So the 5 of concern are captured under that method, as are 13 additional compounds, as was discussed earlier. The price for analysis you're already paying the full price for analysis for those 18
Right.
under that method. Beyond that, I can't speak to the price or the methods and what that would entail if should it be desired to pursue contaminants outside of those 18 by that method.
Okay, that's about $560.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes. So a couple questions in the chat box. We will be receiving, we will be welcoming written comments after the meeting. We have a month to do so. And we will be looking to, we are recording this. If all goes according to plan, we should be able to make it available, certainly upon request, but we'll look into putting it on the website or putting it somewhere that's more accessible should the need arise. So with that, third or fourth final last call for folks if they have comments to provide. So then the next steps will be for us to receive the comments before November 16th. We will review the comments and go work through them. And our directive from Act 21 is to either file proposed rule to regulate PFAS as a class or provide notice of the decision not to regulate PFAS as a class. So that will need to be done by March of 2021. So if there are no other comments or points of clarification, anything else from the state team involved? Okay, then I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to attend this meeting. I appreciate all of the insight and all the input from the folks who have presented and provided comment. I look forward to seeing the written comments provided in addition. So thank you very much, everybody.